I had been alone on that mountain 11 years, and I would have told you I meant to die that way, when the dog started barking at something coming up through the first snow. It was an ugly sound, the way Boone barked, low and certain, not the foolishness he gave a deer. I set down the harness I was oiling and took the rifle off the pegs by the door without thinking about it, the way a man takes up a thing his hands have known longer than his head has. The light was going. Snow had been spitting since noon, the fat, slow flakes that mean business, and by then it lay an inch deep over Spar Creek Basin and was filling in my boot tracks as fast as I could make them. Somebody was on the cutoff trail. Nobody used the cutoff trail. It dead-ended at my gate, at the last cabin before the Black Ridge went straight up into nothing but rock and weather, and the only reason to climb it was to find me, and there was not one soul in that territory who had reason to want to. So I stood in my own doorway with the rifle down along my leg and watched a horse come stumbling out of the timber. It was a played-out animal, a long-legged bay with its head hung near to the ground and its flanks heaving steam, and it had been ridden past the place where ridden things give out. The rider was bent over its neck. For a moment in the failing light I took her for a boy, slight in a man's coat too big through the shoulders, and then the bay quit at the edge of my yard and just stood done, and the rider slid down off it sideways and went to her knees in the snow and did not get up. I am not a man who runs to things. 11 years I had made a study of staying still, but I was across that yard before I had decided to be, and I had a hand under her arm, and she came up out of the snow swinging. She had a knife, a little skinning knife, and her hand shook so the blade wandered, but she meant it. She put it up between us with her teeth bared and her eyes white all the way around, and she said, don't you touch me." It came out a rasp. Her lips were cracked and there was frost in the dark hair fallen loose around her face, and she had the look of a creature run so long and so hard that fear had burned down to the bone, and there was nothing left but the running. "Easy," I said. "Easy now, I'm not the one you're afraid of." "You don't know who I'm afraid of." "No," I allowed, "but I know I'm not him. Put up the knife before you cut your own hand off. Look at it, you can't hardly hold it." She looked at the knife. Her hand was shaking that bad. Something went through her, some calculation worn down to its last coin, and I watched her decide that whatever I was warmth and a roof, and the cold and the dark behind her were sure death, and she could not fight both. The knife came down. She did not drop it. She kept it fisted against her chest, but she let me take her weight, and the weight was almost nothing. She had been a while without eating. I could feel that much through the coat. "My horse," she said. "I'll see to your horse. He's a good horse. He brought me up the hole. He wouldn't quit. You have to." "I'll see to your horse," I said again. "First I'll see to you. Can you walk?" She walked, leaned on me, the both of us breaking through the new snow to my door, and the dog came round us in circles, whining now instead of barking, having decided in the way of dogs that this was a person to be worried over and not warned against. At the door she stopped. She looked back down the trail, down into the dark timber where the snow was coming heavier, and I felt the fear come up in her again like a fever. "They'll follow," she said. "You should know that. Before you let me in your house, you should know there are men following me, and they will not stop. If you don't want it, say so now, and I'll go, and I won't hold it against you." It was an honest thing to say. A frightened woman half froze to death, and she stopped at the threshold to tell me the danger before she'd take my fire. I have thought about that a great many times since. I did not know her name yet. I did not know one thing about her. But a person tells you who they are in the first hour if you have the wit to listen. And what she told me, standing there shaking with a useless little knife in her fist, was that she would rather walk back into the dark than bring trouble onto a stranger without warning him. "How many men?" I said. "3, maybe more by now." "How far back?" "Half a day, less. I lost them at the river crossing, I think, but Creed," she stopped herself on the name. "The man who sent them does not lose things. He finds them. He always finds them." I looked down the trail a while. The snow was a gift, I thought. The snow would close the cutoff by morning and likely close the whole basin behind it, and no man who didn't know the country was going to come up the Black Ridge through a building storm in the dark. We had until morning anyhow, and morning is a long way off when you are warm and the wolf is cold. "Come inside," I said. "We'll talk about who's following you when you've got something hot in you and you're not blue at the mouth. Come on. The dog's named Boone. He won't trouble you." She came inside. I will tell you what my cabin was because it matters to the story. It was one room, well built. I had built it myself the second year after the first one burned, built it of squared logs chinked tight, with a stone hearth at the end big enough to roast an ox and a loft above where I never went any more. There was a table I'd made and 2 chairs, though for 11 years I'd used the one. A bed in the corner. Pelts on the wall and traps, and the tools of a man who lived by his hands, a day's hard ride from the nearest place that sold flour. It was clean. A solitary man either lets his place go to ruin or keeps it like a ship, and grief had made me the second kind. It was warm and it was clean and it was the loneliest place in the territory, and I had wanted it that way. I sat her in my chair by the fire, and I built the fire up and I put the kettle on. And then I went back out into the dark and the cold and I saw to her horse, because she'd asked me twice, and a person who worries over a played-out animal that hard is a person worth the trouble of helping. The bay was in a bad way but not past saving. I got him into the linta with my own stock, rubbed him down, blanketed him, gave him a little water and not too much and a little grain and not too much, the way you bring a foundered animal back slow. By the time I came in stamping the snow off, the woman had not moved from the chair, but she had her hands out to the fire and the worst of the gray had gone out of her face, and the kettle was singing. I made her a broth from the venison stock I kept and I put bread in it to soften, and I gave her a tin cup of it, and she held it in both hands and did not drink for a moment, only breathed the steam of it like it was something holy, and then she drank, and I saw her decide to trust the food enough to be hungry. And after that she ate like the half-starved thing she was, and I let her. And I did not ask her a single question until the cup was empty twice over. "Marin," she said then without my asking, "my name is Marin Adair. Gideon Hart. You live up here alone, Mr. Hart?" "I do." She looked around the clean, lonely room at the one chair, at the place that was so plainly the place of a man who expected no company and wanted none, and something moved behind her eyes that I did not understand then and understood very well later. It was a kind of recognition, like calls to like. I had buried something and built a wall of mountain around the grave, and she saw it in the room the way I had seen something in her at the threshold. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry to bring this to your door. I'll be gone soon as it's light enough to ride. I couldn't go any further tonight, the horse, and me." "Where would you go?" I said. It was not really a question. I knew the country. Below my place there was nothing but down, 50 miles of broken timber to Bowman's Ford, and Bowman's Ford was where her trouble would have wired ahead, if her trouble was the kind of man who sent 3 riders into the high country after one woman. She didn't answer. She looked into the fire. "Mrs. Adair," I said, "I'm going to tell you something and then you can decide what you want to tell me. That snow out there is going to shut this basin by morning. Pass'll close. Nothing'll come up or go down for could be a week, could be the season, depending how it sets. Now, that means the men chasing you can't get to you. It also means you can't get away. So before you decide you're riding out at first light into a country you don't know in a storm that'll kill you, you ought to know there's likely no place to ride to and no way to get there. You're safer here than anywhere south of here. That's just the truth of it. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm telling you what's so." She was quiet a long time. The fire snapped. The wind had come up and it found the corners of the cabin and moaned in them, and the dog sighed and put his chin on his paws. "His name is Creed Hollister," she said finally, in the flat voice of a person finally setting down something they have carried too far. "He was my husband's partner. They had a silver claim up Cinnabar Gulch, a good one, better than good. Daniel, my husband, Daniel found it. Hollister put up the money. They were going to be rich men, both of them. She turned the empty cup in her hands. In the spring, Daniel went up to the claim to set the season's work, and he didn't come back. They brought him down across a mule 4 days later. They said the bank caved on him. A mining accident. Everybody said so. Hollister said so, and Hollister paid for the box and the stone and stood at the grave with his hat off and looked the most grieving man in the county. "You didn't believe it." "I believed it," she said. "For a while I believed it. I wasn't thinking straight those weeks. And then I started going through Daniel's papers because the claim was half mine now, mine and Hollister's, and somebody had to, and I found," she stopped. "I found a letter Daniel never sent. And I found the assay reports, the real ones, that Hollister had been keeping from him. And I found that 2 weeks before he died, Daniel had filed a paper in Bowman's Ford that gave his half of the claim to me outright and clear, free of any debt or claim or partnership, separate property in my name. Daniel was afraid of something. I didn't see it then. I see it now. He was setting it up so that if anything happened to him, Hollister couldn't take the whole thing. He was protecting me. And the day after I found those papers, Hollister came to my house and asked me to marry him. I didn't say anything. I had been a marshal a long time before I was a hermit, and I had seen the shape of this from a long way off, the way you see weather coming. He was very gentle about it, Marin said, and there was a terrible flatness in how she said gentle. He said a widow alone couldn't manage. He said the claim needed a man's hand. He said it would honor Daniel's memory. He said all the things, and underneath every one of them was the same thing, which was that if I married him the deed wouldn't matter because everything I had would be his, and if I didn't, she set the cup down on the hearthstone, careful, like it might break. I told him no. I told him I knew about the assay reports. I should not have told him I knew about the assay reports. That was the foolish thing. That was the thing that turned it from him being patient to him being in a hurry. She looked at me. I took the papers, the deed, the reports, the letter, all of it, sewn into my coat lining. And I took Daniel's horse, the bay, because he's the best horse in the county and Hollister wanted him, and I rode out in the night. That was 9 days ago. They've been behind me ever since. I went north first and they cut me off, and I've been climbing ever since, going up because up was the only way they weren't, until there wasn't any more up, and there was your light. The fire burned down some. I got up and fed it and sat back down, and I thought about how the world had a way of bringing a thing to your door, whether you'd built a wall around yourself or not. "Why didn't you go to the law?" I said. She laughed, one short broken sound with no humor in it. "The sheriff in Bowman's Ford is named Substance No, Pellet, Sheriff Pellet. Creed Hollister owns the freight company, the assay office, half the bank, and the mortgage on Sheriff Pellet's house. Who do you suppose the law belongs to down there, Mr. Hart?" "I have known sheriffs like that," I said. "Then you understand." "I understand." I looked at her a while. She was worn down to wire and bone, but there was something in her that hadn't worn down at all, something that the 9 days hadn't touched, and I had taken it at first for the desperation of a hunted thing, and I saw now that it was different. It was the thing that had made her go through her dead husband's papers when grief said don't. The thing that made her say no to a powerful man's face and then steal his prize horse out of spite. She was afraid clear to the bottom, and she was not broken, and those are two different things that look alike in the dark. "You can have the loft," I said. "There's bedding up there. It's cold, but it's private. You stay until it's safe to go, and we'll work out what that means when the snow tells us. I don't know how long I'll have a guest, Mrs. Adair, but I know it's longer than tonight, so you might as well sleep like you mean to stay." "Why?" she said. It was a fair question. A frightened woman is right to ask a strange man why, and I respected her for asking it straight. "Because I was the law once," I said, "before I was this. And I know the smell of a man like your Hollister, and because there's a deal of country between here and any help, and a person doesn't turn another person out into it." That was most of the truth. I did not tell her the rest of the truth, which was that for 11 years no living thing had needed me for anything but feeding, And there is a hunger in a man for being needed that he can starve down to nothing and call it peace. And her coming up out of the snow had woke it before I knew it was alive. She went up to the loft. I heard her moving around up there a while, and then I heard her stop, and I lay on my own bed below in the dark with the rifle in reach and listened to the storm take the mountain. And I thought she was asleep until I heard her say, soft, down through the boards, "Mr. Hart, thank you for seeing to my horse." "Go to sleep, Mrs. Adair," I said, and after a while we both did. The storm blew 3 days. I have lived in the high country my whole life and I have seen storms, but that one meant to bury the world. The snow came level on the wind so you couldn't see the linta from the cabin door, and the cold behind it was the deep iron cold that splits trees in the night with a crack like a rifle. We did not speak much those first days. I broke trail to the stock morning and evening, a rope strung between the cabin and the linta so I wouldn't walk past my own buildings and freeze. And the rest of the time we kept the fire and kept apart. 2 solitary people each used to the whole of a quiet and now having to share it. But you cannot share one room with a person 3 days and not begin to learn them. I learned that she was no soft thing from a town. She'd grown up on a hardscrabble place herself before she married, and she knew work and she did not wait to be asked to it. The second morning I came in stamping and half froze from the stock, and there was coffee made and the place swept, and she'd mended a tear in my spare coat I'd been meaning to get to for a month. Neat small stitches, a healer's hands or a seamstress's. And when I started to say she didn't need to, she just looked at me and said, "I'm not a guest, Mr. Hart, I'm a fugitive, and a fugitive that earns her keep sleeps easier," and went back to it. I learned she had been a kind of doctor, in a small way. Her mother had been the woman folks fetched for birthings and fevers and broken bones in the country where she grew up, and Marin had the knowledge in her hands. The third day my old wrist, the one a horse had broke for me 20 years back and which ached me every cold snap so I could barely close it, she saw me favoring it, and without a word she got it in her 2 hands and worked it, found the knot of it, hurt me and then eased me, and bound it warm, and it was better than it had been in years. Nobody had touched me with any gentleness in 11 years. I want you to understand what that does to a man. I had to go out to the stock for no reason, just to stand in the killing cold a minute and get hold of myself. And she learned me, I expect. She learned I wasn't going to harm her. I think she knew that the first night, but knowing it in your head and your body settling into it are different. And I watched her body settle into it across those 3 days, watched her quit flinching when I moved sudden, watched her sleep down by the fire the third night instead of going up to the loft and bolting the trap behind her. She learned I didn't talk much, and she learned not to take it for anger. And she learned, because she was a noticing kind of person, the things in that cabin that told my own story without my telling it. She asked about them just once. The 4th day, the storm finally blown out, a hard blue cold clarity over everything, and the basin drowned in white to the windowsills. She was looking at the loft ladder at the rungs, and she said, "There's a child's bed up there, under the spare hides. I moved them to make my pallet, and there it was, a little bed somebody made by hand." "Yes," I said. She didn't ask the rest. She had the grace not to. But she stood there and waited, the way you leave a door open, and after a while I found I wanted to walk through it, which surprised me as much as anything in those weeks. "My wife was a leaner," I said. "We came up here to ranch. I'd had enough of the law by then. I'd been a territorial marshal 12 years, and I'd seen the bottom of what men are, and I wanted to be away from it and just raise stock and a family in a clean place. We had a boy, Samuel. He'd have been, I had to count it, and the counting was its own small grief. He'd have been 12 this year. I built the fire that didn't need building. There was a fever came through, the diphtheria. It took him in 3 days, and a leaner nursed him the whole of it and took it from him, and it took her the week after. I buried them up on the bench under the lone pine where you can see the whole basin. That was 11 years ago. I built that little bed for Samuel before he was born. I couldn't burn it and I couldn't look at it, so it's up there under the hides, and you're the first soul to see it since." Marin didn't say she was sorry. People always say they're sorry and it slides off of grief like water off a stone. What she did was come and sit down in the other chair. She was the only person ever to sit in the other chair, and she said, "Tell me about him. About Samuel. What was he like?" And God help me, I told her. I hadn't said my boy's name out loud in years, and I sat there in the firelight, and I told a hunted stranger about my son, about how he laughed, about how he'd follow me to the stock in his nightshirt before the sun, about the way he said his words wrong and we never corrected him because we loved the wrongness of them. And somewhere in the telling I was crying, an old man's quiet crying that doesn't shake you, just runs down your face while you keep talking. And she didn't look away and she didn't try to stop it. She let me have it. When I was done, she put her hand over my broke wrist on the table, just laid it there, and we sat like that a while, and the fire burned, and outside the dead white basin lay quiet under the blue, and something in me that had been frozen 11 years began, very slow, to ache its way back toward warm. An aching thing is alive. That's what I learned that winter. The frozen thing feels nothing. It's the thawing that hurts, and the hurt is the proof you're not dead. They came on the 9th day. I'd known they'd come. The snow had bought us time, but a man like Hollister doesn't quit for weather. He waits for it to firm. There'd been 3 days of hard freeze after the storm, and the new snow had set up with a crust that would bear a horse if a man knew how to pick his ground, and I'd been watching the cutoff each morning the way you watch a thing you know is coming. Marin had taken to standing at the window herself, and I'd seen her find Daniel's old pistol where I'd cleaned it and set it on the mantel, and seen her check the loads, and I knew she could use it because she'd told me her father had taught her young, and I was glad of it. A frightened woman who can shoot is a different proposition than one who can't. It was mid-morning. The dog gave his low certain bark, and then there were 3 riders coming out of the timber single file, picking their way up the broken crusted trail, and behind them, dark against the white, a 4th man on a tall gray horse who sat his saddle like he owned the mountain and everything on it. "That's him," Marin said. Her voice had gone very quiet and very steady. "That's Hollister. He came himself." "Get back from the window," I said. "Not because I think he'll shoot, because I want him to wonder where you are and how many guns are in here. Let him do the wondering. Wondering makes a man careful, and careful makes him slow." I took the rifle off the pegs and I checked it, though I knew it was loaded, and I shrugged into my coat. "I'm going out on the porch to meet them. You stay in. You keep that pistol and you keep clear of the window and you let me do the talking." But Marin, I stopped at the door. I had not called her Marin before. It had always been Mrs. Adair. She heard it. "If it goes bad, if you hear me shooting, you don't come out to help me. You go up the loft and you go out the loft window onto the woodshed roof, and you take the deer trail up the back of the basin on foot and you don't stop. The papers are what matter. You getting those papers to a real court is what beats this man, not you and me dying in the snow. You understand me? I'm not going to leave you two. You understand me," I said, not loud. And she shut her mouth, and after a moment she nodded, and I knew she was lying, and I went out onto the porch anyway. The 4 of them came up to the gate and stopped. The 3 riders were hard-used men, the kind a man with money can always hire, with cold faces and rifles across their saddle bows, and they fanned out a little the way men do who have done this before. And then there was Hollister. He was a handsome man, I'll give him that, and a big one, fine coat, fine horse, a face that smiled easy and eyes that didn't smile at all. He looked at me on my porch with my rifle held down friendly along my leg, and he looked at my cabin and my lean-to and the smoke from my chimney, and he took the whole measure of me in about 2 seconds and decided I was a thing he could manage, which was his first mistake. "Morning," he called up pleasant. "Cold one. Hate to trouble a man in his own dooryard, but I'm hunting a runaway. Young woman, dark-haired, riding a blood bay gelding, stole the horse and some papers off me and lit out. Tracks come up this trail. I'd be surprised if a man living up here this lonesome didn't notice a strange woman pass. I pay well for what I want, friend, and I want her." He smiled. There's $200 in it for you, gold, just to point. That's a lot of money for one woman, I said. She's a thief. I came down off the porch a step or two, easy, no hurry, and I watched the 3 hired men watch me, and I watched their hands. Funny thing, there was a woman come up this trail in the storm near a week back, half dead. Said there was men chasing her, meant to kill her over a silver, claim her dead husband left her, claim a man named Hollister murdered him for and was trying to steal. I let that sit. The smile didn't leave his face, but it changed temperature. That be you, I take it. The 200 in gold tells me it would. Because a man doesn't ride into the high country in winter with 3 guns and offer that kind of money for a horse thief. He does it for something worth a great deal more than a horse, and the only thing worth that much is the thing he's afraid she's carrying. The smile was gone now. The eyes had been the truth all along, and now the face caught up to them. "And where is she?" Hollister said. "Gone," I said. "Down the back of the basin 4 days ago, soon as the trail firmed enough. Headed for the territorial court at Granger to file her papers, which I'm told are proper papers, a deed and an assay and a letter. Long way to Granger. But it's downhill and you can't catch a 4-day start, and even if you could, killing her now just means the papers get found on her body and asked about. You're too late, Mr. Hollister. You climbed a cold mountain for nothing." It was a lie, all of it, and I told it well, and I watched it work on him and I watched it not work on him, both at once, because a man like that has lived his whole life by lying, and he knows the shape of a lie when he hears one. He looked at my chimney smoke. He looked at the linta where, if he'd had the wit, he might have counted the stock and found 1 horse too many. He looked at my cabin window, where I prayed Marin had stayed clear, and he made his decision. "I think she's in your house," Hollister said. "I think you're a lonesome old man who's took a notion to a pretty widow, and I think she's behind that door right now. So here's how it'll go, friend. My men are going to come up and look in your house. You're going to stand aside and let them. And if you do, I'll forget you lied to me, and I'll even leave you the 200 for your trouble. And if you don't," he glanced at the 3 hard men and back to me, "well, you're one old man with 1 rifle, up a mountain nobody'll come looking at till spring. Stand aside." I had been quiet and easy and old up to then, and I let him have all of that, and then I let him have the rest of it. I brought the rifle up, not pointed at him, just up, just held in 2 hands across my body, the way a man holds a tool he intends to use. And something in the way I did it made all 3 of the hired men go still, because hired men know the difference between a frightened farmer and a man who has done this. And I had done this, a long time and a long while ago, but the hands remember. "My name is Gideon Hart," I said. "I was the territorial marshal for this district 11 years, before any of you came into this country. I have put more men than you in the ground or in the territorial prison than you've got fingers, and not one of them thought an old man on a porch was much to worry about either, right up until they did. Now you listen to me, Hollister, and you listen close, because I'm only going to say it the once. There's a woman under my roof. You want to get to her, you go through me first. And I have buried everything I ever loved on the bench above this cabin, and a man who's already lost everything is the most dangerous animal God makes, because there is not one thing left in the world you can threaten him with. You've got 3 men. I've got a rifle, a door I can bar, 100 yards of open snow you'd have to cross to reach me, and nothing left to lose. You do the arithmetic. And while you're doing it, know this, the snow you came up on is fixing to soften by week's end, and when it does, the only way off this mountain runs right back down past my front sights. I can wait out a thaw. Can you?" It went very quiet. The gray horse stamped and blew. The dog had stopped his noise and crouched at my heel with his hackles up, dead silent, which is the worst sign a dog can give. One of the hired men's hands drifted toward his rifle, and I moved my eyes to him and he stopped. And I knew in that frozen long moment that it could go either way, that we were one twitch from blood in the snow, and I was as ready for it as I'd ever been for anything, and I was not afraid, and I think it was my not being afraid that they read clearest of all. And then the cabin door opened behind me. Marin came out onto the porch. She had Daniel's pistol in her hand, down at her side, and she came and stood beside me, not behind me, beside me, and she looked down at Creed Hollister with a face I had not seen her wear before, the fear all burned out of it and something cold and final left in its place. "I'm right here, Creed," she said. "You climbed the whole mountain, you may as well see me." She lifted her chin. "And Mr. Hart's telling it crooked to save my life, so let me tell it straight since you came all this way. The papers aren't on the way to Granger. They're sewn in my coat, 10 feet behind me in that house. And the letter you've been so frantic about, it's Daniel's hand, dated 2 weeks before you caved that mine on him, and it lays out the whole of it, the salted assays, the second set of books, all of it in case anything happened to him. He knew, Creed. He knew what you were and he wrote it down. So you can kill us both if your men have got the belly for killing a marshal and a woman on a clear morning with the sun up. But you can't unwrite a dead man's letter, and you can't unfind it, and the more bodies you leave up here the louder the question gets at the bottom of the hill. You've lost. You lost the day Daniel mailed nothing and filed everything. You just rode a long, cold way to find it out. I have known brave men. I rode for years with men who'd charge a gun position without a flicker. I never in my life saw anything braver than that hunted woman walking out a door she'd been told to run from, to stand in the sun beside a near stranger and stake her life on the truth being stronger than a rich man's gun. She did it because she decided that running was a thing she was done with, and a person who is done running is, like a person with nothing left to lose, a force the comfortable cannot reckon with. Hollister looked at her a long time, and I watched the arithmetic finish behind his cold eyes, and I watched him arrive where I'd known he had to arrive if he was smart, which he was, that a deed and an assay and a dead man's letter were a fire he could not put out by killing the people holding them, that the killing only fed it, that he'd built his whole empire on the appearance of a respectable man, and that 2 more graves on a marshal's mountain was the one thing that appearance could not survive. He had come up the mountain to make a problem disappear, and found instead that the problem had teeth, and a witness, and the law's own retired hand standing on the porch with a steady rifle. "This isn't finished," he said. "It is," I said. "You just don't like how." He turned the gray horse. His men hesitated, looking to him, and he jerked his head and they came around with him, and the 4 of them went back down the cut-off trail single file the way they'd come, and I stood on my porch with the rifle up until they were swallowed into the timber, and then a while longer until the dogs' hackles went down, which was how I knew they were truly gone and not laid up in the trees. Marin let her breath out. Her hand was shaking again, the pistol trembling, and I reached over and took it from her gentle and let the hammer down and held it, and she turned and put her face against my coat and shook, all of it coming up out of her at once now that it was safe to. And I stood there in the cold sun on my porch with my dead arm around a living woman, and I did not know what to do with my own heart, which had not been used in so long. "He'll go to Granger," I said into her hair, "or send word ahead to have you killed on the road before you ever file. He said it wasn't finished, and that part was true. He'll lose in the end, but he'll try to take you down first if you give him the chance. So we don't give him the chance." She pulled back and looked at me. We, I said. "You think I'm letting you ride off this mountain alone with that man between you and the courthouse? I was a marshal, Marin. I still know men in this territory, real ones, the kind Hollister doesn't own. I know the federal judge at Granger. I testified before him a dozen times and he's honest as a plumb line. We don't sneak your papers in the back door of a county court Hollister owns. We take them out the front door of a federal one he doesn't. But not till the pass opens, and not till I've sent word down ahead, and not till it's safe to ride. Which means, and here I felt the thing I'd been keeping at arm's length all winter come up plain and undeniable between us, which means you're stuck on this mountain with a worn-out old marshal a while longer yet. I'm sorry for it." "Are you?" she said. I looked at her. The sun was on her face and there was color back in it now, weeks of feeding and warmth and safety having brought her back from the wire and bone of that first night. And she was, I understood, standing there, a beautiful woman which I had been too careful to let myself notice, and she was looking at me in a way that asked a true question and would settle for nothing but a true answer. "No," I said, "God forgive me, no, I'm not sorry for it at all." And she smiled, the first full smile I ever saw on her, and it changed her whole face, and she said, "Good," and went back inside to start the coffee, and I stood on the porch a minute longer in the cold, clean light, an old man 11 years frozen, feeling the dangerous, painful thaw of it go all the way down. The pass took 6 more weeks to open, and they were the strangest and the best 6 weeks of my long life. I have tried since to tell what they were like, and the words come up short. We were 2 people thrown together by terror who found, in the long white quiet after the terror passed, that we fit. There is no other plain way to say it. We worked the place together. She was as good with stock as any hand I ever hired, and her healer's hands kept my old broke body moving better than it had in years, and I taught her the high country, the reading of weather and track and timber that you don't learn in a town. In the evenings we talked. Lord, how we talked, 2 people who'd each lived years inside their own silence, opening it all up at last. She told me the whole of her life, and I told her the whole of mine, Samuel and Eleanor, and the long bad years of the law before them and the long empty years of the mountain after, and the telling didn't lessen the grief, but it shared the weight of it, which is the only thing that ever helps. I'd be a liar if I told you it stayed careful. It did not stay careful. There came an evening, the fire low, the snow gone soft and dripping off the eaves with spring finally working into the basin, and she reached over and took my broke wrist in her 2 hands the way she had that first week, only this time she didn't work the joint. She just held it, and she looked at me, and I understood that the door she'd left open all winter she was now asking me to come through. I am an old man, and I will keep the rest of that for myself, except to tell you that there was nothing in it either one of us needed to be ashamed of, and that we were married proper the moment the circuit preacher could be got up the mountain in June, before God and the witness of the 2 ranch hands I hired on once the pass opened, and that whatever passed between us before that was between 2 grown people who had each been alone too long and had freely, fully, with their whole hearts, chosen each other. She came to me free, or she didn't come at all. I'd have had it no other way, and neither would she. She'd had her fill of men who wanted to own her, and I had no wish to be the last in that line. I wanted a wife and a partner and an equal, and that, by God's grace, was what I got. But before the preacher there was Granger and Hollister and the finishing of the thing. When the pass opened, I sent word down with the first rider to the federal judge at Granger, an old acquaintance named Judge Sumner, and to 2 U.S. deputy marshals I'd ridden with in the old days and trusted with my life, laying out the whole of it, the murder and the fraud and the papers, and asking for an escort and a hearing. And then Marin and I rode down off the Black Ridge together in the green of early June, the papers sewn safe in a leather case now instead of a coat lining, and we did not sneak, and we did not run. We rode in the open with 2 federal deputies who'd come up to meet us, straight down past Bowman's Ford, where Hollister had thought he owned the world, and on to Granger and the federal court. Hollister fought it, of course. Men like that always fight, because they cannot believe the fire is real until it's burning their own house. He had lawyers, and he had his bought sheriff swear to things, and he had money to spread. But a federal judge is not a county sheriff, and Daniel Adair's letter was in Daniel Adair's own undisputed hand, and the assay reports told their own story to any honest man who could read figures, and the deed was filed proper and clear, separate property, Marin's free and outright. And there was a thing Hollister had not counted on, which was that once it was safe to talk, once there was an honest court and federal guns standing between the witnesses and Hollister's money, men came forward. The assier he'd bribed, a miner who'd been up Cinnabar Gulch the spring Daniel died and had seen things he'd been too afraid to say. It came apart the way these things do once the fear breaks, all at once, the whole rotten structure of it, and Creed Hollister went to the territorial prison for the murder of Daniel Adair and the fraud against his estate, and he is there yet, an old man now like me, with nothing, which is more than he left my Marin and a great deal less than he deserved. And the good claim up Cinnabar Gulch that all the blood had been over, Marin sold it. Sold it outright the month the verdict came down, to a mining company out of the East, for more money than either of us had ever seen or wanted. She said she'd had her fill of silver and what men did over it, and I never argued. We took the money and we put it into Hollow Pine, into the high lonesome basin where she'd come up out of the snow half dead, and we built it into the best stock ranch on the Black Ridge, and we built a proper house, a big one with room in it, beside the old cabin which we kept and which I am sitting in now to set this down. We had children. I want to say that plainly because I spent 11 years certain that part of my life was buried under the lone pine with Samuel, and it was not. We had two daughters and a son, and the son we named Daniel, for the man whose foresight and love for his wife reached out from beyond a murdered grave to save her life, and though he never knew it, to give me back mine. They grew up in that basin, ran wild and happy in the country that had nearly killed their mother, and they are grown now with children of their own, and the lone pine on the bench has Eleanor and the first Samuel under it still, and we tend it, all of us, and the grief is an old soft thing now and not a wound, the way grief becomes when you let new life grow up around it instead of building a wall. Marin is in the next room as I write this. She is white-haired now and her hands shake a little, the healer's hands that gave me back my own broke body, and she is the whole of my heart and has been for 40 years. Sometimes of a winter evening when the snow comes down over Spar Creek Basin, she'll stand at the window the way she used to, watching the cut-off trail fill in, and I know what she's remembering, and I'll come and stand beside her, the way she came out onto that porch beside me and put my arm around her, and neither one of us has to say anything. But once, a few winters back, with the snow coming down just like the night she came, she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You told me to stay until it was safe." I did. It's been 40 years. Has it? I said. And she laughed, the same full laugh that changed her whole face the first time I ever heard it, and she said, "I suppose it's safe now, Gideon." "I suppose it is," I said. And we stood there at the window, two old people who'd each been frozen and each been thawed, and watched the snow come down soft and harmless over the home we'd built out of nothing but grit and the choosing of each other. And I thought, as I have thought every day of those 40 years, that a man who believes he has lost everything knows nothing about everything until it walks up out of the snow and barks at his door and asks for nothing but a fire and a chance to be safe. I gave her the fire, she gave me back the world. That is the whole of it, and it is more than enough.